The movement screen that I will be presenting for this project is the landing error scoring system, better known as the LESS. I'll be critically appraising the article in front of you by Padua. But before we cover the article, I am going to show you a short video on what the landing error scoring system entails.
I will be evaluating the landing error scoring system, or the LESS assessment. This is a great test for indicating if an athlete has a risk for injury during jumping and landing movements. It's a good test for most sports because most sports include jumping. This will be based on a 13 yes-no questionnaire assessed by a sports performance professional. The lower the score, the less risk of injury. It begins using a 12-inch platform, and there will be a mark out in front of the platform that is half of the height of the athlete. They'll jump off 2 feet, land on 2 feet, jump straight up, and then repeat the process. The evaluation begins with the athlete standing on top of the platform, jumping off the platform, off of 2 feet, landing in front of the marked area on 2 feet, squatting down, jumping straight up with no pause in between. They will repeat this process 3 times. Then the professional should be recording the athlete jumping from the front and from the right side. This will give a good view of flexion, extension, and movement within the sagittal plane to start the assessment questionnaire. Starting position, both feet are on the box. His arms will swing back before he jumps. In this next frame, we can see that his knees and hips are in line before he begins to take off. Now we can see that his knees are turning inward and his toes are starting to pronate, which is putting him in a compromised position to begin. We'll begin the 13 questions that will be giving a yes-no answer, and based on that yes-no, will be given a 0 or a 1 point. The higher the score, the more movement deficiencies the athlete possesses and the greater risk for injury. The first question, is there trunk flexion on contact with the ground? No, so he gets a 0. Is there lateral trunk flexion at contact? And he is vertical, so he also gets a 0 for that. Initial foot contact is symmetric. Stance is not greater than or less than shoulder width, so he gets a 0 for both of those questions. There is no ankle plantar flexion, so he gets a 0 for that. Next, we look at foot position, internally or externally rotated greater than 30 degrees, and he does not have that either, so a 0 for both of those. We can see at initial contact he has knee valgus, so he gets a 1 for that. You can see his knee flexion angle is greater than 30 degrees, so he gets a 0 for that. Next, we see that his hips are flexed at initial contact, which gives him a 0, and his hip flexion at maximum knee angle is more than initial contact, and that is no, so he gets a 1 for that. Here we can also see there is not more trunk flexion than at initial contact, so he gets a 0. This athlete will receive a score of 6, which indicates a slight risk of injury and that his movement patterns need to be adjusted to help him. The pros of this test are they're easy, inexpensive, they're valuable for risk assessment, and the cons are based on the professional's assessment. So I hope you understand the landing error score system assessment a little bit better after this video. Thanks.
Before discussing the article for this assignment dealing with the critical appraisal of the LESS article, I wanted to go over the reliability and validity of the LESS. In an earlier study, Padua in 2009 found that the LESS demonstrated a strong validity between jumping landing biomechanics and those risk factors associated with poor jumping mechanics. In that article, he also found that it had a inner rate of reliability of 0.84, which was excellent, and an intra reliability of 0.91 as well. In another article in 2010 by Nate, validity was found to be moderate to excellent. Again, in this study, the intra-class reliability was shown to be excellent at 0.835, and the inter-rater agreement ranged between the novice and the expert between 100% agreement in items 1, 5, 8, and 10 on the list that was covered in the video, down to a low of 65% on the item number 15. In another study by Padua in 2011, again, he found that the less had a inter-rater reliability of 0.72 to 0.81, which is good to excellent, and an intra-rater reliability of 0.79, which again was good. Conclusions, the less has been determined to be a reliable test, and it has also been shown to be a valid test as well when comparing different groups of individuals and jumping biomechanics. The study that I'm going to do a critical appraisal on is done by Padua et al. 2015, in which he looked at using the LESS as a screening tool for interior cruciate ligament injuries in elite soccer athletes in the Mid-Atlantic region. There was 129 elite youth soccer participants that participated in this study. Went from August 2006 and 2009. And basically, what the study did was these athletes were evaluated for their jumping mechanics using the LESS prior to each soccer season, and then was followed throughout to see who would sustain an ACL injury. The results of the study indicated that 7 participants, 6 female and 1 male, sustained an ACL injury during those 3 years, and that a ROC curve analysis suggested a optimal cutoff point of 5 on the LESS, generating a sensitivity of 86 and a specificity of 64%. When evaluating the results of this study, one has to look first at the end. There was an end of 829 individuals, and out of this, 25% were less than the age of 13 years of age, which could skew your results because research has shown, particularly for females, that ACL injuries typically occur between the age of 15 and 18. The average age of those that sustained an ACL injury in this study was 14.9, and most of them also had a score higher than 6. Another problem with this study is when you look at the ROC curve here in this picture, you can see how jagged it is all the way up. What you want is a ROC curve that comes up and is smooth. This is definitely not smooth, which kind of questions the validity and the reliability of this ROC curve to predict ACL injury. Another thing that I need to question is that if you look here, one of the females who was injured, her first score that she had in one of those seasons was a 6, and then that following season she had a score of 3, which is below the cutoff, and yet she suffered an ACL injury, which kind of again questions the reliability and the validity of this study. Also in this study is the fact that it had a positive predictive value of 1.4%, while it also had a negative predictive value of 99.8%, which, if you go back and look at that injured athlete who had less than 6 and still got injured, kind of makes you question about the results of this study. The biggest question I have about the reliability and the validity of this is that the two assistants who did the testing for the lefts, they evaluated the film and scored each of the participants. And according to the study, there was no reliable test to look at their inter-rater reliability or their intra-relator reliability. They basically said that because of the previous study by Padua in 2009, that the reliability is good enough, and basically they did not do a reliability for those two individuals, which again, that definitely calls into question the validity and the reliability of the results of this study. Conclusion, basically, the results of this said there's a possibility that the LESS could be used as a screening tool to identify individuals who are at risk of an ACL injury. This would be in agreement in the study in 2009 by DeStefano, but these results would be in disagreement with the Smith et al. Study, which was done in 2012 over a 3-year period involving 5,407 athletes. And in this, they determined that basically the LESS had no predictability for ACL injuries. So what does that mean? That further study is needed to be done, exploring the use of the LESS as a predictive model for ACL. And that's where we go from here, to look at other studies and conduct other studies to see if maybe we need a bigger N or a different population. And that's my conclusions. Thank you very much.